Welcome, everybody. My name is Emily Heath, and I'm General Partner of venture capital fund called Cyberstarts. I'm also a former CISO of United Airlines, DocuSign, and other companies. And I'm super excited today to welcome our guests who are going to be discussing one of my favorite topics, an all-time favorite of data. I think as a former CISO, I have such appreciation for the complexity of data and the footprint that we have and how we're securing it. Now we've got new technology and AI coming into the mix, and how we think about the vast amount of data that we have out there to solve these days. So without further ado, let me introduce the panelists that we have here today. First of all, we've got Michael Keithley, who's the CIO of United Talent Agency. We have Edmund Mack, Deputy CISO at Haleon. And we have Yotam Segev, co-founder and CEO of Cyera. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Great to see you all here. Are we all excited to talk about data? Okay, so I'm going to hit this off with the first question, maybe for you, Michael. Data security is nothing new. It's been around for a long time. Why is it still getting so much attention? Why now are we in this era where everyone I talk to seems to be focused on data security? Why is that?
Well, because when the bad guys try to, get data, that's what we're concerned about, right? Whether it's the new, SEC rules or just reputation or what have you, it's the data. That's what they're trying to get, and that's why it's so important and why it's always relevant. It's evergreen. It's data, and securing it is never going to go away as an issue from my point of view.
Yeah, super important. It's one of those things that I think is so tangible to everybody because it impacts every single organization. It's just, I think now with terms like DSPM, data security posture management, we're maybe thinking about it in a bit of a different way than we used to before. We used to think about things in terms of DLP when we thought about data. When you think about that, Edmund, in your world, why are you focused more now on data perhaps than you ever have been?
Yeah, definitely. So when I look just back over a little bit of like the last 10 years we've been through as an industry, we really went from sort of the castle moat philosophy of protect, with firewalls and all these other capabilities at the perimeters of our environments, to putting our services in the cloud and in cloud-based solutions as well as SaaS solutions. And really in those environments, it's really just our data that's there, right? So it's no longer the infrastructure components and all these other things that are protecting it. So focusing on the data that's in those environments is really the core thing that we're going to be concerned about, definitely from a regulatory perspective. But that's essentially the data that customers have.
Yeah. And let me follow up with you on this one real quick. You talk about kind of the regulation and the governance now that we have to do across data. It's I think even since GDPR days now, many years ago, it's just advanced so much when you think about what regulations are coming around data. As you think about, in addition to governance, I'm going to go now, what kind of controls have you implemented to secure that data? And then Yotam, I want to move to you after Edmund's had an opportunity to answer, because you see this across multiple companies as well. But in addition to the governance, like how do you secure the data that you've got that's now in cloud environments, it's in on-prem environments and everywhere else? How do you even start to think about that, Edmund?
Yeah, so I think, at a fundamental layer, there's some things that have transitioned with time, right? So there's basic encryption of data and making sure that it's protected from an access perspective. As you go in the cloud, identity access management has been ever more important to understand who has access to what, when, and data becomes a large portion of that. We've heard a lot in the last few years, especially with the advent of people moving to the cloud, of people leaving their S3 buckets and things of that nature open to the public. That's all data access, right? So making sure the correct controls are there from an encryption as well as an access part becomes fairly important. And then with that move to cloud and data access, there's been the advent of sort of new capabilities of how do we tag data based off of its data classification or business use types, to then be able to enact, I would say, more sophisticated dynamic controls across those environments so that people can still access and you can still enable the business and make sure people can operate in real time, but with, I would say modern data loss prevention controls in place. That fabric together puts together a better overall enhanced security posture to understand where your important data is at, who is accessing it, can you delete data that no longer is necessary in the environment, therefore reducing your risk posture across the organization, and being in a state of better protections of knowing what you have, where it's at, who's accessing it, and making sure it has the correct controls around it.
That's amazing. It's so true. You really can't think about data just singular. You have to think of it in terms of who's got access to it as well. Those two kind of go hand in hand. Yotam, as CEO of Cyera, you work with many, many large customers across the world. What challenges and opportunities do you see in this industry when you're thinking about how people are thinking about this huge challenge of data?
So I think the biggest catalyst today for big enterprises is around generative AI. And I think that we're seeing generative AI change the enterprise in two ways. First of all, the data leakage, the data sprawl that we've seen to external services is getting enhanced in a very, very meaningful way. And that is scaring a lot of CISOs and a lot of leadership teams and causing a reaction. Sometimes the reaction is to forbid, to block. Sometimes the reaction is to start investing more and more into their own data security programs in order to be able to enable, but to do it securely. And I think that the fundamental challenge in that is the ability to distinguish between the data that matters and the data that clutters.
Yeah.
There's so much data that is being amassed, especially now in our cloud environments that are completely extensible. Right? There's no more, we don't have a physical limit on how much data we can collect any longer. And the ability to distinguish and put a spotlight on the data that matters, whether that's personal information, whether that's intellectual property, whether that's the company's finances, or other protected data types within the organization, highlight those data types and focus our controls and efforts with exactly the same risk-based approach we've taken to any other layer of the stack. Focus our controls and our attention on the data that matters. So I think that that's the biggest driver and catalyst that I'm seeing happening in the market today. And I feel that there's a lot of urgency around it. Right? I feel that organizations that want to adapt to this new age of Gen AI, age of data transformation, will find themselves in a very sticky position, because it doesn't matter how many vulnerabilities you've patched. If you don't have control over your data layer, you're still exposed, and exposed where it hurts the most.
That's so true. And I know for those of you that know me, I've said this so many times. I always used to say that there wasn't a data discovery or tool on the planet that could tell me where all my data was and the stuff that mattered to me the most and how I was protecting it. That is until now. And there's this new breed of solutions that are really looking to solve this fundamental problem, because I need to understand what matters most to me, where it is, and how I'm protecting it. And if I can't do that, these are fundamental basic issues that have been highly complex for security teams to manage. Michael,
Emily, can I just comment on something or kind of amplify what Yotam said? As a CIO, I have a slightly different point of view maybe than CISOs around this. But when it comes to the board level and having a discussion with the board right now, Yotam is right. It's all about AI. I mean, there's such incredible opportunity and fear and concern, quite frankly, and lack of understanding of what it is and what it isn't. And the concern around, intellectual property, publicly identifiable information, company confidential data, whatever it is, getting back into public models is really, top front and center. And when I step back and I try to educate them, because it's really important to not do geek speak or talk technical or what have you when you're dealing with the board.
totally.
And it's really the data that matters. Once again, what Yotam said is identifying that, and you know that can be a needle in a haystack. But if you can identify the data that matters, that really reduces the scope of what you have to protect. And the visual that I use that's been very effective with boards is if you picture, if anybody's ever been to the Louvre and they looked at the Mona Lisa, if you're looking at it, there's literally the Mona Lisa there, and they have several different physical barriers that keep people from it. So there's like defense in depth, and there's all the crowds of people that are physically kept away from it, so they can't physically touch it. But yet behind them on the walls are other priceless works of art, right? And so the Louvre has identified that the Mona Lisa is that most important piece of data, whereas the other stuff, they've kind of deprioritized that stuff. And so when I talked about it, I said, we need to identify the Mona Lisas. What are our data that's super, super important to us, and really focus on protecting that data. And that seems to resonate with me.
I
And
think
let me
spot on.
add to that, Michael. Let me add, because I think the really interesting thing about data is that it's much more similar to fluid, to liquid, than it is to solids.
Mhm.
So, while the Mona Lisa, you know exactly where it is, and you can build your defenses around it. One of the biggest challenges we're seeing with data is that, we've taken a risk-based approach. We've segregated our ecosystem, our environments. We have our production environment, we have our dev, we have our testing, we have sandbox environments, and we focus our efforts naturally on protecting production, assuming that all of our sensitive crown jewels, the Mona Lisas, are there. But what we're seeing is that data is so similar to water that it finds its ways to so many other parts of the ecosystem in the environment. It finds its ways to production, to dev environments, to sandbox environments. It finds its ways into SharePoint sites and OneDrives that it shouldn't be in. And that's where I see the most exposure for enterprises today. It's not in your production environment, where all of your attention is focused on, and you have the best defenses, and everything is investigated and interrogated. It's in the other parts of your ecosystem that we might assume be less valuable because they don't have the Mona Lisa. But the Mona Lisa we're dealing with, it's got legs. It's got legs. It's moving around.
It's running around the Louvre. Yeah,
Just
I
people
love this
can't control it.
analogy. Love this analogy. All right, so Michael, I just want to come back to you for a second, because as you mentioned, you're a CIO, so you might think about things a little bit differently. But this is a great example when we think about, we now understand what the Mona Lisa is, what the crown jewels are, whatever you want to call them. I'm now going to call them the Mona Lisa because of your analogy. I think it's much better than crown jewels. But there's a risk and reward here when you think about, we still have a business to run. And number one job of security and technology leaders is to be business leaders first. And we have to really consider the reality of how we approach thinking about risk and reward. And that can be in terms of security, it can be in terms of privacy, protecting intellectual property. Like, how do you as a CIO think about this risk and reward to make sure that you're not hindering business from getting their job done, but you're also paying attention to making sure that the Mona Lisa doesn't get stolen off the wall?
Really good question. And I think it's true of, whatever aspect you're looking at in securing data. And once again, I go back to a visual. I'm thinking about, in answering a question, a visual I have for the board. And it's literally a slider. And I have, secure on one end and easy or lack of security or lack of friction on the other side. And it's a slider back and forth. I can guarantee, any of us here could guarantee that we will have an absolutely secure organization that will never get breached. But no work can get done. I mean, people would just rebel and it would clog all the gears of the organization. On the other hand, you can be too kind of hands-off and laissez-faire and introduce more risk and, the bad outcomes that comes with that. So I really look at it kind of as a slider. And then I also look at it when I'm balancing that risk versus security and the friction involved. I really look at it as, the human aspect of it, right? And so often, like, I think of our phishing campaigns we've had in the past, which I've kind of come full circle. I used to be really proud. We'd have great metrics of how we would test people and how good they were doing on our anti-phishing. And then something came out of the left field and just blew it all out of the water. And I've shifted my mindset from kind of either fear or top down or compliance or HR, thou shalt, whatever, and more around stories and really trying to encourage people to share how they got tricked or their bad experiences that they've had. And I find those really resonate with people. And it really has moved the needle with each individual in the organization caring and understanding it's not their responsibility, it's not the CISO, it's not IT, it's not HR, whatever, risk or compliance, it's me and each and every one of us. And so sharing stories about, how things have gone bad and people being vulnerable, I really find extremely effective. And then in kind of extreme cases, I've gone so far with once again permission to kind of out people. And so I will take things that people have clicked on and literally redact their names, but actually show kind of examples of the stupid things that people do. And it introduces a bit of humor, people laugh, but it really kind of sinks in, I think, more in the populace of the employees, and therefore you get a better outcome.
Yeah, it's such an important part of any security program and any business, quite honestly. And I think this concept of education and how we influence our employee base, nothing has ever driven me more crazy than saying that, employees are the weakest link and the worst defense. That's just not ever been my approach to security. You have a workforce of people who are professionals at what they do, and they need to go do their job. At the same time, security, yes, it's a shared problem, and it's something that we all have to take responsibility for. So how we approach educating and I would say operationalizing what we want people to actually do when it comes to data is not an easy task, right? Because what we don't want to be is we're going to send you an education PowerPoint slide for 12 slides, because PowerPoint education doesn't actually educate anybody. I'm interested, Edmund, from your perspective. You have a very, very large organization at Haleon. It's a global organization. How do you even tackle this concept of, we'll call it education just because it's tangible and people can understand it, but really it's about operationalizing your standards and educating people on how you want them to operate and giving them guardrails. How do you approach that for such a big company? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, Edmund. Occupational hazard these days.
Yes. I'm laughing a little bit just related to the cringe around education. Just because, I feel like a little bit we're over-educated and just throwing a lot of information, but really understanding what that means is the hard part. So I think there's two portions to it. I think one piece on the tech leadership side is really understanding, what is the business trying to do? Like, why is the business sending data or doing these processes, and really trying to, sit inside our business colleagues' seat and understand in their world, what does good look like and what does success look like? And then sort of mirroring that with our policies and standards and expectations and outcomes to then try to, educate. I like the way, Michael articulated it as it relates to like the storytelling of, this is what good looks like. These are the hazards that can come our way if we do things the inappropriate way, and bringing people along that journey. My experience has been that, like the largest hurdle that we have is just people doing this shift into, this is what it means in today's context. This is what it means in today's operating models, and then trying to work backwards from there to get into, policies, processes that are actually, things that people can abide by, and it's not hard for the business to utilize and operate. And I'll laugh a little bit with you guys a little bit here, share a little bit of a story. I think about when we first rolled out DLP at a different company. This is multiple years ago, but it was like no USB capabilities. Not understanding that the sales force needed to download PowerPoints to then go to clients and sell the product or sell the business, right? So those are some of the gaps that end up happening, that you really need to understand those processes to then put together curriculum and education path for your various different business processes that's truly attainable.
Yeah, and if there's one common theme for any company and any employee, it's probably data, because everybody deals with data some way, shape, or form. And we talk about this a lot in the CISO community, that I said it earlier, but we're business leaders first and technology leaders second, and really having a strong understanding of how your business actually operates is just so fundamental to being able to then enable and support them when it comes to matters of technology and security. One thing that is flipping that on its head a little bit, and I think organizations are looking toward their security leaders to really help educate them in the realms of AI. We recently did an internal survey at CyberStarts with some of our CISO community on how many CISOs actually own AI security. And it was only over 90% of them said they own AI security. But of course, as with anything else in security, we're only as successful as the collaboration and the partnerships that we have across a company. And are we the best people to own AI security? Probably, because nobody else will. But that means we have to understand AI and we have to understand what it is that we're trying to secure. So when you think about that from a business perspective, and Yotam, I'll ask you first, because again, you see this across multiple companies. As people start thinking about automation and generative AI and the way that businesses are communicating and collaborating with each other, there's a lot more sensitive data at play. What are some of the things that people are thinking about in terms of how do we secure that? Like, what are the challenges in this, and how do you see people approaching them?
It's an amazing question, especially because it connects many of the things we discussed over the last few minutes, stemming all the way back to education and how do we communicate this with our board. So what I'm seeing across, especially the larger enterprises, is an appetite to understand the company, to understand the business. And that's exactly what Edmund touched on right now. I want to be able to sit in my business partner's seat and understand what they're trying to achieve. So the same goes to the fundamentals of the data security program. People are asking us to show them what data they have out there and to be able to pinpoint what data is important, what data matters. But they're also asking us to show them and explain to them how that data is being used. Where did that data come from? Where is that data going? Who's moving it across the organization? Essentially to map the business processes that are driving the motion of data, the generation of new data within the enterprise. And I think that the classic example, the classic story I'm hearing from our customers is that in the past, in order to understand what data the enterprise had, they had to interview each and every application owner within the enterprise, sometimes hundreds of them. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't know, sometimes they tell you the truth, sometimes they have reasons to tell you part of the truth about what data exists within their applications. But once you have automated sensors, monitoring tools like Cyera, that conversation changes from a one-directional conversation in which the security or IT organization approaches the business partners with nothing to give back, just the curiosity to try and understand their world, into a mutual conversation where we can complement what they're telling us with the findings that the sensor actually has on the ground. So we're not coming to that conversation, hey, Mrs. Application Owner, please tell us what data is within your application. We're coming with our view of what data is in your application, and we can try to make sure that it matches and it aligns with the understanding that the business has about what data it's generating and how that data is being used. And of course, the security profile. How are we keeping it? What are we required to do with it? So I think that the ability to really understand the organization's data is tied very intimately to the ability to understand the organization's business and to really become a business partner for the organization with all of the new initiatives that it's progressing.
Yeah, Michael, you mentioned AI earlier, and again, in your organization or across the technology landscape in general, this concept of how now, as Yotam says, we're trying to understand what the business needs are to think about how we leverage generative AI and forcing technology teams almost to move at a much faster pace of innovation. How are you thinking about that? Because this is a fundamental technology for a CIO org in terms of not just from a security perspective on how we need to protect it, but also how we can leverage and use generative AI in technology teams to innovate much faster. How are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate because from the board to the CEO down, they're really supportive of AI in every facet. And so I'm spending a lot of time really focusing on that. And, from a security point of view, it can be both an incredible accelerant that really can help us, like a tool like Cyera that really can help leverage AI to identify or classify or do things, capabilities I couldn't do before. On the other hand, the bad guys are using it too. So from the phishing email no longer has bad grammar or English to like really sophisticated things like Worm GPT, which is a ChatGPT clone that was trained on, malware data, so it's going to be a little bit of, for the older folks that are watching, Mad Magazine always had this cartoon Spy versus Spy. And I always think about it that way, as the good guys kind of get up, then the bad guys do, and it's just back and forth. And it's both opportunities. But I think, from the positive point of view, I think AI is going to allow us to do the proverbial search for the needle in the haystack that humans just couldn't do in the past. It just was not practical. And so I think it'll be proactive, and I think it will help a lot more set up context. I still think you need a human in the loop, and ultimately somebody in the security team says, yes, go remediate this or go deal with this or whatever. And going back when I was smiling when Edmund was talking about, I'll call it the failed DLP things of 10 years ago that we all went through. I think AI is going to fast and quick in very good context help us understand, and then the human can say, yes, go remediate this, go deal with this, what have you. So I'm a real optimist that it's going to help us, but I'm also a realist knowing that, the bad guys are going to leverage this too. And so it's this never ending game. And then the last thing about AI is you always need a human in the loop, because at least with today's versions of LLMs, some of the challenges around hallucinations and bias, et cetera, you've really gotta check that. And so you can't just blindly take it on face value.
Yeah, exactly. All right, final question, speed round here. Same question I'm going to ask for each of you. So we've got this new era of technology that I think we'll see more innovation in the next 5 years with AI than we've seen in the last 50 years. Just in what we're now going to be capable of doing, which makes me very excited from a business perspective as to how much we can grow as businesses. So we got this incredible technology available to us. We've now got also this new breed of security tools that are looking to secure these. We've got DSPM players like Cyera and others. You've now got AI security tools that are looking to secure the large language models and those kinds of things. My question to each of you is, given all of that new landscape, what are you most excited about for the future? I'm going to go with Yotam first, then we're going to go to Michael, and we're going to wrap it up with Edmund. Yotam, take us up. Speed round.
I think I'm most excited to see the leading enterprises in the world putting data as a first-class citizen within the enterprise. And I think that AI is going to be a part of that revolution, but not only AI. And I think that is going to change the way that we fundamentally consume products and do business. And the examples are countless, but that is the one thing that I'm most excited that is happening today in the world.
Incredible. Michael.
Yeah, I mean, not to be redundant here, but I think AI is the most exciting thing. And I think it's going to continue this pace of change, that the pace of change is accelerating. And so it's going to be, a challenge for all of us to kind of keep up. And then I also am excited, about spatial computing. And I think that finally that might lead to new kind of paradigms, new user interfaces, new ways that we can deal with technology and provide, great outcomes for our businesses.
Incredible. Edmund.
Yeah, so for me, it's definitely on the AI side. I think that a lot to the points that you said, the innovation that we'll see in the next 5 years, just from a competitive landscape perspective, is going to create a lot of opportunities for people and for companies, and looking forward to see how that changes the landscape, brings in a lot of new competitors as well.
Incredible. I could listen to all three of you all day long. I can't thank you enough. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you to our incredible panelists for this wonderful insights, and thanks for joining us today. See you soon.
Thank you.